Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the One Spot podcast again. Today, I am joined by Melissa Jacobson, who's going to help give us some advice on finding the right person to fill that billing specialist role in your practice. So, Melissa, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Hey, before we dig into the topic, which I think is hopefully a topic everybody could use a little bit of advice on, and I know you have a lot of experience on, why don't you tell us a bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been in the eye care industry now for just shy of about 20 years. I started out honestly as a technician in an optometry practice here in Florida and worked my way up from technician to office manager to insurance billing specialist, eventually all the way up to the chief operating officer for the practice. It was a 12 location private practice here in Florida and was there for about 12 years. And then I moved over to RevCycle Partners, began there in the credentialing department, and eventually moved into the billing department. I now run the billing department and I'm responsible for the team that delivers our billing service to all of our customers.
I love this topic. There's very few things I can share. Things that people tell me from the billing world, but I have done a lot of hiring in my life as well. So when you brought this topic up, I'm like, oh, it's so important to get the right person with the right skill set and the right person for your team. So I got kind of passionate about the idea when you brought it up. But why would you say hiring the right billing specialist matters for a practice?
Yeah, because it's probably one of the most important roles in a practice from my opinion, and I know it might be a little biased, but I think the insurance part of a practice, that revenue cycle is so critical. It's often an area that doesn't get the attention that it deserves because that part of the practice is easy to be a black hole,
Yeah.
right?
There's
So,
probably not a lot
so
of people that have a lot of experience there. So they're
yeah.
kind of, yeah.
And unless you have somebody that's knowledgeable and somebody that's paying attention to it, it can be a very dangerous black hole where you lose a lot of money, you do a lot of work and don't get paid for it. It's a complex topic too. I know that in eye care, we tend to deal with a smaller set of procedure codes and diagnostic codes, but it's still just as complex as a lot of other specialties, especially when you consider that we have to deal with both vision plans and medical insurance. There's a very unique aspect to billing. And unless you have somebody that you trust who's really on top of it, you may find that cash flow isn't what you expect it to be. You may find that patient satisfaction isn't what you expect it to be. And you may have staff in general that are just frustrated with their overall experience in the office every day for a variety of reasons that all stem back to not having a strong revenue cycle process.
Yeah. It's interesting because one of the things probably the experts in the industry, which I am obviously not, that I hadn't thought about when I came in. I know how important cash flow is. I know how important it is to make sure you're collecting everything that you should be collecting and somebody's on top of it. But one of the doctors I was talking to mentioned how, and you just mentioned it, patient satisfaction, how if it takes, to sort through the insurance side of it, and then you send an invoice or a bill to a patient, like, oh, this is a patient's responsibility. 6 months later, patients are not very happy about that, right? And that is an angle that I hadn't even thought about, the impact of the timeliness of doing a great job in insurance billing, because it does impact the patients, right? I mean, making sure that they got their benefits taken care of and taken advantage of, and then also that they get their bill if there is a patient response. It's probably a lot easier to collect that sooner than later, I would imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
So thinking about all those things and how important the job is, what sort of qualities do you look for in the people that you're hiring?
Yeah. Great question, right? I think naturally we all immediately go to the thought that if you're going to hire a biller, they need to be a biller, right? That they should already have billing knowledge, that they should be able to read an EOB and decipher a denial and know what a ICD-10 code is. And don't get me wrong, all of those things are great to have. I, however, am of the mindset that that knowledge really shouldn't be the first thing that you're looking for. To me, a great biller is somebody that has a certain skill set and a certain mindset. Most of the time, we can be taught to understand payer rules and how to post a remit inside of the PMS. There's really great resources, whether that is provider reps or continuing education classes. You can be taught those things. However, what you can't teach somebody is to be really truly a critical thinker, a problem solver, a good communicator, be detail oriented, be passionate about fighting for every dollar. So I think a true strong biller, a quality biller, a great biller is somebody that possesses analytical skills and problem solving skills, somebody that is, again, detail oriented and organized, somebody that has strong communication skills, and that they consider themselves adaptable or comfortable with technology. So when it comes to analytical skills, I think you want to look for somebody that can look for trends, that can understand when they're starting to get denials, that they need to look for the root cause of the denials, try and connect the dots, and make sure that there's not an underlying issue. They don't want to just band-aid it and get that one claim paid or that one claim paid off. They need to be always on the alert for additional trends that maybe need to be addressed at the root cause. They should also be comfortable with using their resources. So, especially in billing, they're never going to have all the answers, right? Even after you've been doing this for, nearly 20 years, you may feel like you have a lot of the answers, but you're never going to have all of them. And especially in insurance, the landscape changes all the time. The rules change all the time. And so having a certain level of comfort with not knowing the answer and being able to
that adaptability.
you gotta be okay with admitting, like, I don't know it, but I'll figure it out, right? And know that you can use your resources to get there. So I think you want to look for somebody that is okay with needing to problem solve first and foremost, and then being able to do it. And when they're given an answer that doesn't make sense, being willing to question that too. In insurance, I think a lot of us who have experience with it will tell you, if you call a payer and speak to two different people and ask the same question twice, you may get two different answers.
I've heard that.
And while I believe that payers want to do everything right, they get things wrong sometimes too. And so if you get a denial that doesn't make sense, you need somebody that's going to say, can you appeal that for me? Or can you review that for me? Can you bubble that up? Because I don't think that's correct. So being willing to dig in and understand, I think those problem solving skills are critical. With that, right, comes a lot of detail-oriented organization skills that are critical. Being able to keep track of those things, keep really good notes, be accurate with trying to prevent denials and such in the first place. The communication skills I mentioned, again, when you're talking to those payers or you're documenting those, being a good communicator, I think is critical, but not only from that perspective. A true quality biller is also going to be a really skilled communicator when it comes to talking to you as a doctor or you as a practice manager or you as a staff member, because they're involved in all aspects of the practice, whether that's the eligibility and benefits up front, if it is educating when we're seeing trends with denials, or it's talking to a patient, helping them understand why their deductible applied. Communication skills are so incredibly important. And then finally, that last topic I mentioned about being adaptable and being comfortable with technology. In insurance, the landscape, again, changes all the time. And being able to navigate the payer portals or understand the different payer manuals. There's a lot of information that's required in the position. And so they need to be comfortable with using technology, changing technology to get to the answers that they're looking for.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
beyond the knowledge, really, you should be seeking a certain skill set
Yeah.
when you're interviewing.
And I do think, looking back on times where I've hired different people in different roles, I think have been times in my life managing people where I have more time to coach people. And then there have been times where admittedly, I'm like, listen, you kind of have to get in here and figure it out. And I think with billing, the examples that I hear a lot of the times from the biller, the billing specialist, or the practice manager, if the practice manager is a stopgap because they have to, they're the ones that give the answers versus somebody figuring it out on their own, it's a lot harder, right? So maybe when you have a little bit more time and you can really coach somebody and then transfer all of your knowledge, even though it does change all the time, like you said, but somebody that is not going to be afraid to be like, you know what, I'm going to figure this out on my own. Mm-hmm. I think you said that a couple of times in there is just, it's got to be one of the key things, because otherwise everything still goes through, somebody like you who probably could have answered the questions, but maybe when you were running the practice, you didn't have time to answer every single question. So bringing somebody in that had that initiative to go sort through it, I got to think would be important. And again, sometimes you have more time to coach people and sometimes you don't have as much time. So bringing somebody in self-driven can make a big difference. Today's episode is brought to you by OneSpot Billing Software. When a 2-doctor practice suddenly lost their biller and their practice administrator went on medical leave, their AR shot up to over 30%. A new biller was doing everything she could, but couldn't make a dent. After implementing OneSpot, AR dropped to 15% in just a few months and now hovers around 5%. OneSpot Billing gives teams the clarity they need to collect what you're owed. Visit onespotbilling.com/offer25 to book a demo and receive a $25 Amazon gift card. All right. So how do you post the job, or are there certain questions that you ask to figure out if they're a good problem solver? Like, how do you create the job description, and then how do you sort through people that you think have those sorts of qualifications?
Yeah. So I think a good, solid job description is important. I think when you're drafting that job description, it's certainly okay to talk to some of those technical skills that are a nice to have. Make sure that you mention it would be great if they already know the difference between a medical and a vision claim, a routine vision versus medical claim. Make sure that you mention it would be nice if they understand the PMS you use already, for example. But I would list those as preferred candidates have knowledge of, and don't exclude candidates who don't have that knowledge. Most of the job description, I would really focus on the type of person that you're seeking, those skills, that personality type that's going to fit your office culture. Think about that self-driven, self-starter, those types of things. If you focus the job description on the qualities you're looking for, then I think not only will hopefully you find the candidates that you're looking for, but they'll come prepared to that conversation to talk more about their skill sets and less about their knowledge, right? And then I think when you're sitting down with them, ask questions that help reveal those skill sets. You can ask ones that reveal basic understanding too, right? Something like, explain to me the difference between a routine vision claim or a medical claim, or help me understand how the chief complaint might drive the billing of an exam. Those are very technical based questions that might help you weed out individuals that really have no understanding. But I would focus most of your questions on those skill sets. One of the ones that I really like is, what happens when you encounter a problem that you don't know the answer to? At what point do you bring somebody in to your decision-making process? And I think that question, if they, approach it first from the point of view that it's okay not to have all of the answers, I think right there, that's a check in the
Good sign.
positive
Yeah.
box, right? But then if they can walk you through a logical thought process of utilizing their resources, not just the office manager who might not always have the time, right? But utilizing, whether that's the calling the payer or looking at a provider manual or looking back at past claims or even reaching out to a forum, a set of trusted peers. Google these days, there can be wrong answers too. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But most of the time, if you have an issue and you go Google it and you can understand how to properly take the information you find and decipher whether or not it's true, the answers exist out there.
Yeah.
So I like that question. My second recommendation for a solid question would be, tell me what happens when your day doesn't go as you planned. How do you organize yourself in a moment of chaos? Because in the billing world and the eye care world, most of the time, these billers are wearing other hats too.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe they're dedicated just to the billing role, but most of the time they wear other hats. And even if they are dedicated just to the billing role, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, I think says a lot because again, rules change unexpectedly or payers get things wrong or all of a sudden maybe you missed your re-credentialing and you've been kicked off a panel and you need to pivot, right? So I think when something goes wrong, when there's an emergency that comes up, you need somebody that's going to be okay with that. So if they can talk you through prioritizing, taking a step back and breathing, utilizing their resources again. And then if they speak to having strong organizational skills, making a list, keeping a track of where they left off on things if they have to suddenly shift and come back to it. I think making sure that they have a thought process around that is really critical. So again, I would ask questions that help you uncover the skill set that you're looking for.
Yeah, super helpful. I know you mentioned the online forums and stuff. I will say that has been fun for me to see how supportive everybody is of each other. And I think a lot of that speaks to what you said of how often things change. And, you can be pretty sure everybody seems so open to helping people with maybe as they're just beginning the journey. And I see I know that this is probably going to seem like a basic question, but I think it really speaks to how complicated it is and people understanding how hard it is to navigate. Have you seen, this may be a loaded question, but have you seen areas and trends in areas that excellent billers come out of? I know you mentioned you had experience at different areas in the practice and you went into billing. I seem to talk to a lot of people that were in the practice and moved into billing to take it on. Do you see that as a trend? Do you see people who worked in public service as a trend? Or do you see any sort of thing? You may not, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think looking within your own staff already, right? You might have somebody on staff that is a good problem solver and maybe you have them in a different role because they're also very skilled in that role and maybe it might be challenging to move them out of that role, but if they could be good in billing, I would recommend exploring that with them too, right? There's something very powerful about holding other roles within the office prior to getting into billing because the billing position does touch so many areas of the practice. Understanding the challenges of working the front desk and how patients may come in and think, oh, here's my vision plan, that's all you need. But that front desk staff member having to fight that good fight of educating the patient around needing their medical insurance. The biller has already walked in those shoes. If they've been that, if they've experienced that, then not only will they be more prepared to tackle those issues themselves, but then also help those individuals in the front desk position overcome those obstacles. Same thing with experience in the optical or experience with various testing inside the office. So I very much prefer to hire individuals into a billing role that have prior experience in an office setting. Eyecare office settings, fantastic. I would take somebody who has worked as a tech versus somebody who's been in, hospital billing every day,
Yeah.
just because they understand what it means to be in those shoes a little bit better.
Our nuance of eye care that
Yeah.
is so unique. I think that's, I can say too, again, just from my experience, when, you're at a company and we've got, I'm sure people from large companies listening and people from smaller, that feel more like a family practices. And I've worked in both those worlds and hired too. It's hard when you have to move somebody on your team that's already doing a good job somewhere. But I think people who are self-starters and, like a challenge and don't want to quit on figuring things out are probably the right people for billing specialist role. And they may get, they may feel a little locked in if they don't see opportunities to try other things in the practice as well. And so even though it can be a bit agonizing to move people around or promote from within, it makes it a much more enjoyable workspace, I think, for everybody, because they see they have that opportunity to do something else if they want to try something
Yeah.
else, even though it can be stressful for you. All right. Any sort of red flags that you would caution people who are looking to hire?
Yeah, I think my biggest is when you're interviewing somebody, I would really recommend trusting your gut around whether or not you feel like they're going to fit in with the culture of your office,
Yeah.
with any position, really, but billing especially. I think as you're going through that process and trying to understand if they have the skill set that you're looking for or some of the technical knowledge that you're looking for, if things just don't feel right, there's something very powerful about trusting your gut. So, especially with today's day and age, with technology being able to prep people for
Oh,
interviews,
yeah.
people have gotten really good at interviewing
I hadn't even
and
thought about
anticipating
that. Like, you
questions.
could ask AI,
Yep.
tell me the questions you think I'm going to get asked and good answers for them and not even have to think of your own answers. Oh my
Yep.
goodness. Yeah.
Yep. And so I think you need to do your best to read between the lines,
Yeah.
right? And trust your gut there. But beyond that, I think solid communication. If they're not communicating thoughts well with you in the interview process, if they're not professional in their communication, if they're not confident in their communication, that's a very big red flag for me, because billing, again, whether you're talking to patients or you're educating staff or you're talking to a payer or you're writing an appeal letter, or there's such a heavy emphasis on good communication. So
Yeah.
those are the really big red flags. I think you can teach most people a lot of things, but if your gut says it's not right, or if
Yeah.
they're a bad communicator, I'd
Do
probably
you check references when you hire? Just curious.
sometimes.
Yeah.
So again, people are going to put
Probably some of
references
where
down
they come
on their
from. Yeah.
resume because they know that person's going to give them a good reference, right? And if they put somebody down that's maybe not happy with their prior performance, chances are all that person's going to do is validate that they did in fact work there.
Yeah.
And they're not going to give you those nitty-gritty details. I would validate probably more like if you're willing to social media stalk, right?
Yeah.
Maybe stalk is the wrong word there, but if you're
We know what you
comfortable,
mean.
yeah, I think you can tell a
Yeah.
lot about individuals by their social media presence. But
The stuff
honestly,
all of us parents are telling our kids to keep in mind, right? Like stuff that is out there, people can see it. So see what's out there. Yeah. It is
yeah.
interesting. I will add, because I managed a lot of people as you, there are people that use me as a reference that I would not be a good reference for them. And, if you're checking references, if somebody just confirms the time that they worked there, I would throw that up as a red flag because that's what I say, right? And then the people who crushed it for me, I gush when I get called
Hmm.
on references. I'm a little surprised sometimes by some of the people who use me as a reference, and I don't mean that bad, but like then on the other side of it, I'm always like, that's so interesting, to think about that because they may not have very good references if I'm on that list for them. I'll say. I had one other question now. Where do you do your posts? If you're not in a practice and you don't have somebody that you can hire within, do you talk to your office? Do you, look locally? Do you look to hire? I know at RevCycle Partners, there's remote opportunities, but if you're in the practice, when you were in the practice, did you hire remote billers? Do you like to have them in-house? Where do you go? Do you have advice for people? Because I think with all of the technology information there is out there right now, and wanting to get good candidates and not wanting to get 1,000 candidates that are no good, do you have any advice on where to post or where to try to pull people from?
Yeah, I think Indeed is my personal favorite in
Yeah.
terms of posting positions out on the internet. I think you're going to get a mixed bag in terms of people who have experience and who don't. Again, AI is great in a lot of ways, but it's also starting to feed us a lot of candidates that
Yeah. That
don't
are right.
actually qualify for positions. There is something very powerful about a referral from
Yeah.
a current employee. When I was in a practice, I was not shy about talking to patients too, right? Like
Sure.
if you have a patient that you've been seeing for a long time and you've got a good rapport with them, you're going to know if you think they would fit well
Yeah.
with your office. You're going to get to know that person and
Oh, not just
understand.
asking them for referrals, like talking to patients, like, come work for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Don't be shy when you run into a good person. Don't be shy about making them an offer.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not the right time or place for them, but you never know when it will be.
Yeah. I've had practices like in corners of the country that, are like a very ethnic area where like they need everybody in their office to speak Chinese, or they need everybody in their office. And I know a lot of the doctors will say, we go to our patients and hire them all the time because they're already in the community. We already know, they might speak the other language that we need them to speak and that sort of thing. And I guess I never even thought about that, like outside of that environment, going to the patients, for it as well. I will say I've always liked Indeed too, not to give them a shout out. Maybe we'll get them to try to sponsor the podcast or something. But it is funny to me because on the sales and marketing teams that I've, been in charge of and had to hire from, all of my roles have been remote. And there's a spot on Indeed where people, well, first of all, don't ever apply to a job where you don't create a cover letter. Here's advice to the people getting hired, in my opinion. Like, don't make it an AI cover letter. Spend some time doing actual research, and write it in. And then Indeed has a little like comments box in the bottom. And I could count people that would just be like, I want to work from home. And I'm like, really? Yeah, let me hire you. And then you would get some people that would be like, oh my gosh, I had a history of like my grandfather was an optometrist and I'm so interested, like just like the most heart. And I'm like, that feels real, not AI. And don't put in that little comment box, I just want to work from home. That doesn't really bubble you up as somebody who, is going to be a go-getter and out there too. Not that working from home is bad, but if that's your best answer to why, the job, why you should be considered for the job, maybe put a little more effort into it.
Mhm.
Not AI effort. Well, all right, Melissa, is there anything else any other advice or any final tips you want, or do you want me to wrap this up and thank you for joining us?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think again, I would just keep your eyes open, your ears open. It's such an important role, and
Yeah.
you want the right person. You want somebody you can trust, somebody who's gonna do a good job for you, and you never know when that person may cross your path.
Yeah. Not apologetic for knowing the importance of collecting the revenue, right? Patient
Yep.
care. I always say this, patient care is so important, but everybody needs to get paid. And it's okay to say we need to get paid for the care that's being delivered. And whoever your biller is, they're kind of the person sitting between you and that. So they need to be unapologetic about celebrating the wins,
Yep.
celebrating the wins with the money. So, Melissa, thank you so much. I know how terribly busy you are, and I appreciate you taking some time to share some of your experience. And hopefully it helps other people that maybe don't have as many years experience in this area as we do find the right fit for their team.
Absolutely. Thank you.